Thank you. So our goal is to keep within our time frame and respect your time. We really appreciate you taking time from your busy schedules. What we would like to do to make sure that we're covering the things that you're most interested in is Linda's going to put a short poll up for you to let us know what you're interested in. We do plan on covering very briefly climate changes in Milwaukee and the plan that's being developed to address climate and equity, and how you can participate. And Linda, do you have that poll handy? Wonderful. So if everybody would just take a minute and select your first choice for what you're most interested in, we really appreciate it. So how are we doing for the poll results, Linda? Great. It looks like finding out more about Our Future Milwaukee is an area of greatest interest, with some other interest in 25% interested in the planning process, and 25% about climate change and equity, what the recommendations are. So we're going to be covering all of that, and we'll put a little bit more emphasis on the coalition. Thank you for taking time to fill out that poll for us. Linda, would you advance to the next slide? So I'm covering the introductions today, and I'll be closing out and handling discussion. But this time, I like to introduce Deneen Powell, who is helping us with outreach and brings a great deal of expertise to this topic. And Deneen, you can take it from here.
Thanks, Jennifer. I apologize, but I'm having a little bit of internet instability. So I've turned off my camera just to make sure that all of the energy is dedicated to keeping me online and here with you. So just to get started, this picture took place on August 10th of 2021. Last year's August storm reminded us that Milwaukee is already being affected by climate change. The storm left more than 100,000 Milwaukee residents without power for a week. Next slide, please, Linda. The storms of last August are just one example of how climate change is affecting us here in Milwaukee. And this particular scene is from a flood on 35th and Capitol in 2018. We can see that, it's making events like this more common. There's floods, there's drought, we have issues with heat, there's increased air pollution, and of course, food systems disruption. Next slide, please.
It's already up.
Oh, sorry. Most of us can't afford to have the power go out in our homes, to lose an entire refrigerator of food, or to have our car destroyed in a flood. This is particularly true for households with fewer economic resources. And unfortunately, climate change exacerbates inequity. Low-income communities of color are more heavily affected by extreme weather events such as flooding and heat waves, and they have fewer resources to deal with the destruction that is caused. Next slide, please. So, actually, could you go back for a moment, Linda? I wanted to point out that the number of people in our community that live in poverty is 1 out of every 4 Milwaukee residents. If you're a person of color, you are twice as likely to live in poverty as a white person. For example, 33% of African Americans and 28% of Hispanics live in poverty, compared with 14% of white residents in this city. Next slide, please. In response to these challenges, the Milwaukee Common Council established the City-County Task Force on Climate Inequity in 2019. It consists of government staff, environmental businesses, and community organizations. Its purpose is twofold. First, to make recommendations addressing the ongoing climate crisis. And secondly, to reduce racial and economic inequity through green jobs. Next slide. Scientists agree that to avoid irreversible damage to our planet, we must reduce global greenhouse emissions by 50% by 2030 and by 100% by 2050. The Milwaukee County Task Force on Climate and Economic Equity has established a goal for our cities of reducing local emissions by 45% by 2030, while simultaneously addressing economic equity. We only have 8 years to meet that first benchmark, so there's an urgency here to take action. Next slide, please. Thanks to a survey of emissions conducted by ICLEI, the Local Governments for Sustainability, for the city of Milwaukee, we know that the greatest sources of emissions locally are, we know what the greatest sources of emissions are locally and where to cut them. And here's a little sources of Milwaukee's greenhouse gas emissions from 2018. You can see that residential buildings are at 31%, transportation 22%, industrial 22%, commercial buildings at 23%, and waste at 2%. Next slide, please. We're developing a plan to make this possible. Last year, the task force recruited more than 80 members of the community to work together on 9 work groups representing different sectors of the economy. That was formed in 2019. The 9 work groups, I'm sorry, the task force was formed in 2019, the work groups in 2021, and we formulated the work groups, researched and developed initial recommendations that were presented to the Common Council in March. The initial public input was gathered through the surveys conducted in person and online. In addition to a video survey, we received more than 640 written survey responses. Once the work groups completed their work, a contractor has been hired now to compile the recommendations into one proposal for a final round of public outreach before publication. The recommendations are organized into the big 10 ideas, or 10 big ideas, which identify actions that we can take to reduce emissions and improve our city. All include an equity component by creating or expanding family supporting green jobs. Some of the proposed recommendations are already in partial development or deployment, but all need to be approved by the Common Council. And implementation will depend on adoption and funding by city and county governments.
Linda, can you advance to the next slide, please?
So here's a few highlights. Milwaukee will work with the Green and Healthy Homes program to simultaneously address energy efficiency and lead abatement. This program creates better living conditions for Milwaukee residents while also lowering energy costs and usage. Transportation is a major player. In addition to enabling people to access public transit and creating safer streets for walking and biking, we need to make it easy for people to charge electric vehicles. It is crucial that we work with We Energies to reduce our reliance on coal to generate electricity. Greening the grid is about creating clean energy from local wind and solar resources. Nature in the city is about increasing our tree cover and preserving green spaces while protecting the ecosystem and providing relief from heat waves. Green infrastructure and redirecting water will prevent costly floods. Reducing food waste will help us address food insecurity and reduce emissions from landfills, and that's methane emissions. The Green Jobs Accelerator will help make this all possible by expanding the workforce with a special emphasis on access by people of color and low-income residents. And finally, resilience ambassadors will enable residents to access these and other services that will help them reduce their carbon footprint and cut costs. You can find, next slide, please, Linda. You can find more information about each of these recommendations on our public engagement website. And there's the bit.ly Engage Milwaukee link. Next slide, please. Addressing climate change and economic equity is integral to ensuring that families in our communities have their basic needs met. There are many causes or concerns that may draw us in, and what we share is a belief that everyone has the right to clean, healthy, and safe environment, and that the opportunity to work in family supporting jobs I'm sorry, is anybody else hearing an echo? Because I keep getting hit with one.
Nope.
Okay, just if everyone can make sure they're on mute, that would really help. Next slide, please. So addressing climate change is really about taking care of people. Our messaging helps people to make the connection between local conditions due to climate change and inequity and how the solutions to those issues provide personal and community benefits. This is just one example. Each of the recommendations include a reference for personal and community benefits. Yes, I can definitely provide that bit.ly link again, and it is actually bit.ly/engage MKE. So if you look here, you're welcome. If you look here, there's local conditions we see and solutions. So we have the heat waves, we have solutions around, say, for example, weatherization services. And then that benefit is right there. It's lower energy costs, increased comfort, and health. The social impact, of course, then becomes reduced emissions and green jobs. That's just one example, and we should be able to show you more of that. It's in the actual plan itself. Can we go to the next slide, please? So elected official and city staff are under continuous pressure to generate results for a multitude of urgent issues. For many of them, climate change is low on their list of priorities. In addition, many electeds may not consider how climate and racial justice are intertwined challenges that will impact other urgent problems. So it's up to community members to keep attention focused on the long-term issues of climate change and inequity. Jennifer, would you mind sharing a story about your experience working, going to a Common Council meeting and what you saw there around the city budget hearings?
Sure. Actually, I think Ted was at one of those hearings too. We were at a budget hearing, and I noticed that there were only like 3 of us who really talked about climate, and we were talking about it in a general sense of it's really important to address this. Please keep this in your budget. But there were dozens of people talking about other issues such as safety on the streets. And the thing that I really noticed is that if all those issues that people were talking about will be exacerbated if we don't address climate inequity. So to me, that was a big learning experience that we really need to get out and make our voices heard and let our elected officials know that as citizens, this is important to us.
Thanks, Jennifer. I think that the risk for us as a community is that the plan may not be fully adopted, or even more likely that it will not be fully funded for implementation over the next few years. If we don't come together as citizens and non-governmental organizations and make our voices heard. The task force will be wrapping up its work this year, but before we retire, we want to hand over the important tasks of promoting the plan and advocating for its full implementation to a coalition of supporters. Joined together, our voices for climate justice will be stronger and much more effective. Is it the next slide? We still have some issues to work out, including who will act as the lead agency and the timeline for the handoff. But right now we are building relationships with individuals and community-based organizations to provide this information and reach diverse communities. Our goal is that this network will form a basis for a working coalition that will amplify and support the work of the task force. So this is a slide on how the coalition will interact with city government. And as you can see, there's definitely this space of joint action and events. The city government will have that focus on the website, on, of course, promotion and announcements. And we also have policy. The coalition will be responsible for education, advocacy and support, community outreach. The benefits include those listed on the slide, as well as becoming a part of a larger citywide network, being kept informed about recent development and events, and receiving educational and other resources. Jennifer, did I miss anything there? I want to make sure we've covered it all.
No, I think you did a great job. I would like to point out on this slide that the city and the Eco Office working together will be responsible for reporting what's happening with the climate and equity plan as it's adopted. So they're responsible for identifying, what's being accomplished, where they are in the plan, what the funding is. So as the coalition's job will be to access that information and put public pressure on our elected officials to make sure that the plan moves forward. Does that make sense?
Sure does. Thank you. I think I'm turning it over to you now.
Perfect. Thank you for making this presentation. Linda, next slide. So at this point, what we'd like to do is turn this over to you folks and find out what your questions are. I expect that you have some, and have a discussion about that. I think we could probably take down the slideshow for now, Linda, but we'll put it back up toward the end. And one of the questions that came up at the previous meeting that we had on Wednesday, I believe it is, who's going to be part of this coalition? So I'll just talk about that briefly while you think about what your questions are. But basically, we want to make that clear that the coalition will be formed by individuals, nonprofit organizations, businesses, and other non-governmental groups. This needs to be non-governmental because the government can't advocate to itself. So that's one of the problems that they run into in the Eco Office is they, as city employees, they can't advocate for the plan. As individuals, they can, of course. So this is a non-governmental coalition, and we want to have both grass tops and grassroots representation. And by that, I'm just learning what that means. And basically, people on the ground and also leaders in the community all being engaged. What kinds of questions do you folks have?
Hi, this is Ann. Oh,
Ann,
sorry.
Please go ahead. No, please.
This is Ann with Vanguard. So what is your estimated timeline of getting all this drafted, presented to Common Council, and stuff actually goes into law?
Good question. We're still trying to figure some of that out ourselves, but for sure, we do have a timeline. I believe that for the September 15th, we have a September 15th kickoff event coming up. We hope they'll put that on your calendar, and maybe Deneen can tell us a little about that in a minute. But in time for the September 15th kickoff, the GRAFE, the company that we hired to pull this plan together, take all the recommendations and put them together in one plan. GRAFE is saying that they'll have the draft ready for the September kickoff on this 15th. And then about a month later, it needs to go before the Common Council, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. Does that sound right,
Linda? It
goes
before the zoning committee to be introduced as a part of an amendment to the city plan. That will give the plan a little bit more muscle so that as it's a part of the city plan, then it's much easier to get funding and provide resources to some of the items on the climate and equity plan itself.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, can I just kick in a little, just the process that'll go through zoning committee and also the planning committee, city planning committee. And expected timeline to actually get it passed is something like January or February, I believe, as far as all is formally being completed.
So actually what we're trying to do is bring it before the Common Council during the January meeting. And if there's any issues or questions or it doesn't quite get through at that point, then we will push it to the February meeting.
So it sounds like the key things to keep in mind are the September 15th kickoff event where the public will see the first draft. And then the, for sure, the January meeting would be for the Common Council.
And one other thing, we might keep in mind the mayor's budget public comment session that would be coming up on October 3rd.
We will be providing a list of all potential dates where you can connect. And what would be great as we start to form the coalition and we're engaging and involving others is to really show up for the meetings and to make the calls so that they're aware of the fact that we are in support of the climate and equity plan. And the more people that do that, the easier it will be to get it passed, not only at the city level, but at the county level as well.
Yeah.
Great.
And Deneen, would you take this opportunity to say a bit more about the kickoff for the Our Future Milwaukee Coalition that's being planned for September 15th?
Yes, so as you mentioned, Linda, it is being planned for September 15th at No Studios. If you're familiar with that, that's in the old Pabst space. It's going to be from 3 to 4 p.m. We will actually have a listening session, a town hall discussion on where we're at with the plan as it exists on the 15th. So we will have Eric Schomburger from the city eco office do the presentation, and then it will be followed by a question and answer session. There will be an opportunity to listen in, to also look at some video that we will have available during that time. For those who choose to join the coalition or you're thinking about joining the coalition, you will receive an invitation to join us upstairs at 4:30 in the lounge, the Skyline Lounge up there, from 4:30 to 6 for a networking event where there'll be a cash bar and light hors d'oeuvres. And it's just a chance to have those more detailed and nuanced conversations about the climate and equity plan.
That's great. I see that Terry Wiggins has had her hand up for a while. Terry?
I actually have a few questions. First of all, since this is a city county effort, what about the county in approval of all of this?
In terms of the plan, it originally was going to be as a countywide plan, but the and Ted, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's my understanding that the data for the city was more available. They didn't have data for the city, so the idea is to start with the city and then gradually expand out to the county. Is that accurate, Ted?
Yeah, that's fairly accurate. It's worth saying county is in on it, and there's a member of the county board who's a co-chair of the task force, so they're very much engaged, and their sustainability director has been at all of our meetings. The challenge for the county is they're very focused on county operations and developing a plan to basically eliminate greenhouse gas emissions in county operations, which are substantial. But to get really community-wide reductions, the other Milwaukee County municipalities have to be on board and participating. And that is very much something in process. There are not very many localities municipalities outside of Milwaukee in the county that are doing serious climate planning. So the community-wide element, county-wide, is going to take more time, and there's less of a really clear plan the way there will be for the city.
Yeah,
you.
and I would just
Thank you.
add to that, there has been a greenhouse gas inventory done for the county as well. We did the cities first, and then one was done for the county as well. And as far as the county's involvement, the focus has been on county operations alone. While, you know, just for the reason that Ted was pointing out, that anything county-wide has to involve all of the individual municipalities. And, you know, whereas on the city end, we have been looking at the entire city community-wide for those greenhouse gas reductions and programs.
Okay,
And-
great, thank you.
And we do have Ann White next. followed
Actually,
by
no,
Patricia.
I said I have a couple of questions. My next question is that this coalition is going to include businesses. Does that mean that We Energies might be part of it?
I don't think so, but that's a good question.
That would be tough.
Terry, I think We Energies would not be included because it's a utility, and that's not really one of our focus areas.
Okay.
And I would speak plainly about this. I don't see why not. You know, this coalition is really made up of people who really see the value of enacting, you know, dramatic plans that'll dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions and also greatly reduce racial inequality in our area. And We Energies is just not a full partner with that goal. They are a partner in some respects working with us. Eric Schamberger highlights that. But I think the idea that they're fully committed to what this plan is and what the coalition would be about is pretty dubious.
Yes, this is an advocacy group, and so I don't know that it would be appropriate for We Energies to be on it. Again, they can't advocate against themselves.
Right.
And Terry, if you have remaining questions, let us come back to you, please.
Okay.
And Anne, you want to go ahead?
How does this coalition that's starting up now differ from the work that we did all of last year on the climate meetings? And then who at Grafe is drafting this plan?
Okay, so to answer your first question, the work groups were formulated or formed and working with the city and county government. And so they often were in an awkward situation that they couldn't advocate for different political with elected officials because they were part of the structure, part of the system. And this is going to be an independent group outside of the city government. Ted, does that seem like a reasonable kind of summary of how we differ? And Deneen?
I was going to answer the question for Anne about who at Grafe is working on it. It is a team approach led by Stephanie Hacker, and Sarah Wilhelmina is the main contact for us there, and Brianna Farillo is also working with us on the plan. So those are our main connections and contacts. There are other team members that we interact with, but those are the ones that we talk to on a regular basis, and Sarah is leading that group.
And I'd like to add to the response there, Anne, that all of the 80 some working group members worked very hard to put together recommendations, and they did not take on the role of advocacy, and the role of all the work group members has pretty much come to an end. Certainly they'll look at the draft plan that comes out, but we, as the work group members, are not in the position to go forward and mobilize the community behind the plan. And that's the role of the coalition. And why don't we go to Patricia, and thanks for that question.
Yes, I'd like to hear a little bit more about the recommendations and what are the most important things that you're going to start on? What have you prioritized? What you're going to begin with? Is it green housing, electric chargers, the easier things? What concrete things are going to be done?
I could comment on that briefly, and others can chime in. It's a really great question, and a lot of what the working groups did is try to figure out what gets the most bang for the buck, what can be done soonest with the least resources, what really requires federal funding. So that is all in the plan. I could name some things, but yeah, that is like what the whole planning process was about. And there's certainly an understanding that some things are going to come sooner than others.
Yeah,
That's a good summary. I would like to, Linda, go ahead.
yeah, I want to add to that, going back to the greenhouse gas inventory that you saw. The main sources of emissions in the city are buildings and transportation. So we know that the programs related to those two sectors are going to have the biggest impact in bringing down the emissions. So retrofitting homes, and there are lots of different proposals on the transportation end. Those will have some priority.
So I would recommend, Patricia, that you check out the website that we referred you to, the bit.ly/engage MKE. It lists all the different proposals and gives a short synopsis. You should know that because of federal funding that's come down the pike, some proposals have in part been partially started. So they might already be under, some parts of them might already be underway, such as implementing the Complete Streets programs. There's some efforts to get on board with some of that already. But I think the best source of information will be that website for you to see what's all included.
So, please keep coming with your questions. We do have, let us hear from Louise and then go back to Terry.
Yeah, and Linda, I should say there's a question in the chat we should get to after the next one, maybe.
Okay. Louise here. My question has to do with the county inventory. The League of Women Voters is going to be looking at reaching out to municipalities within the county. And I'd like to know, we'll have to work with the coalition, obviously, to figure out when and how to approach these municipalities. But does the greenhouse gas inventory for the county, is it specific by municipality or is it the county as a whole?
It's the county as a whole.
Okay, so basically, if we go to one municipality, we can say you're contributing to this. The fraction of it has to be reduced for the city of Milwaukee, then I presume. The city of Milwaukee inventory is not included or is included in the county inventory.
Yeah, the county inventory would subsume the city inventory as part of the county.
Okay, thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
And just parenthetically, a lot of the municipalities, until very recently, We Energies refused to share the data we'd need to do an inventory. And some of the municipalities were kind of excited that Milwaukee, the city, was able to get that information out of We Energies for the first time. And they recognize that Shorewood or Wauwatosa or other cities can do their own inventories as well.
Right. Okay, thank you. So we can get that information through the coalition.
Yeah, it'd be a process, but certainly assistance can be provided as far as helping the other municipalities do inventories and learn about what their greenhouse gas emissions are.
Okay, thank you.
So I'd like to answer the question that Ted pointed out to in the chat box, asking about the role of faith-based communities
Mhm.
and organizations in participating. And as Terry is aware, I've reached out to the Interfaith, is it the council? I can't remember the name now, but the Interfaith work council that's active in Milwaukee. And I think that that religious organizations have a strong role to play because they have strong religious motives for protecting the earth and addressing issues of inequity. And so, of course, we welcome you to be part of this coalition. There was a question about whether you must be a city of Milwaukee resident or a county resident. I should think that county resident would be sufficient. So if you are a county resident and you want to join us as part of the faith-based coalition or a faith-based cruise, we welcome you to do so.
Well, Jennifer, I'd just like to take that a step forward. I kind of mentioned it in my response to Ted online in the chat, but I also feel that faith-based organizations can play a very active role in educating the public about climate solutions. And so one of the things that I would love to see our coalition do is work towards educating more. The more we do, the more we talk about climate on a day-to-day basis. When we talk to climate, I always say, talk about climate every day to everyone. And when we do that, then we're able to develop that following and add to our chorus of voices when it comes time to pushing these things through policy and getting it funded. The more we're talking about it, the more people will put the pressure on the elected officials. And that's really what we're looking to do.
I think that's a really good point. I'd like to point out that the Interfaith Conference recently hosted a meeting with Catherine Hayhoe. Some of you may have heard of her. She's doing some amazing work promoting the whole idea that we just need to talk about this. We don't, even those of us who care about it, don't talk about it with our family and friends. And she's saying we need to get out there and let people know this is on our minds and it's important. We want to overcome the bystander effect where nobody talks about something, so you think it's normal. It's not. Climate change is not normal. So we need to talk about it. It looks like Dan has his hand up and so does Terry.
Yeah, so we have Terry, I promised Terry a chance to come back and then Dan. So we have a few more minutes before we do a final poll. Why don't you go ahead, Terry?
Terry, you're muted.
All right. In the presentation, coal was mentioned specifically, but getting off fossil fuels was not. Was that intentional or what? Tell me
No,
more.
it was just poor wording on my part. Basically getting off fossil fuels.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. That struck me too. I realized, oops.
Yeah, I thought that too. It's like, oh, oops, I should have said fossil fuels instead of coal. I'll go back and change the script for the next meeting.
Thank you very much.
How about
Dan?
Dan?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make a connection to the idea of community engagement with the planning and community education. And I don't mean this to be a tangent, but the Congress is going to pass a massive energy climate bill today. I think it's $800 billion. It's just massive. And a big part of that is about incentives for homeowners, and to what extent renters will have really significant incentives to do major renovations in their house relating to energy conservation and the like. This is a really excellent opportunity to engage in community education and advocacy while also helping people really take advantage of these incentives. I put that out there. Is that in the scheme of things, in the thinking of the coalition, that this kind of consumer advocacy that I see being offered to us through this energy bill, is that in the scheme of things for the coalition?
Oh, definitely. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because one of the things we know is that one of the reasons that talking about climate and equity hasn't been real successful in the past is because it was all doom and gloom and people just literally shut down mentally and emotionally because it would feel so overwhelming. And so this is a wonderful moment in time. Two wonderful things are coming into alignment, one of which is Yale has done extensive studies across the nation and here in Milwaukee, showing that 75% of the population now understands and believes that climate change is a human produced problem and that we can do something about it. And now we have this wonderful resource to offer. It's like there are things, positive messaging about action that people can take is really effective in helping getting people engaged instead of just scaring them. So this is terrific that we have this opportunity to promote the new resources that'll be coming down the pike. And I think the coalition will be even more important to help us make sure that the word gets out to people that this is a resource that'll benefit you and your community. So thank you for raising that issue. Does anybody want to add to that?
No, I'll just add that it is a crucial component. So one of the plan elements people will see when it comes out is the concept of a resiliency ambassadors, having people who really help to spread the word and educate the community specifically on like climate resiliency. And a lot of us are thinking, well, at the same time, they can spread the word about, hey, you can cut your energy bills in half and make your house a lot more affordable to live in. Right, these things all come together, and hopefully that's part of the planning. In addition to the coalition's work, hopefully the plan directly addresses that.
Yeah, and I think part of the coalition's work will need to make sure that those resources go to the communities that need it the most, that it's equitably distributed, because oftentimes the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and the squeaky wheel is often middle class and upper middle class people. So we need to make sure that we are a voice for those who are not able to speak up for themselves. Are there any other pressing questions before we conduct our final poll? Louise? You're muted.
Quick question about ownership of homes within the city. So many of the units in this city are rental. Is there some kind of plan in this component in the plan that will help address not the landlords getting all the money, but the people who are renting?
It's a great question. I believe the number I've seen is about half of Milwaukee residents rent, actually. So that's substantial, and that is something that is in the planning process. A lot of cities are addressing that. We call it the split incentive, where the landlord owns the home, but since the tenant pays the energy bill, there's not a lot of incentive to do, like efficiency upgrades or renewable energy. So that is something that's been discussed a lot on the Green Buildings group, and hopefully will be in the final plan, some specifics to address that.
Thank you.
Well, again, I want to thank everyone for your questions. They're really helpful. And not only do they, are you helping us to understand where you're coming from, but you're helping us to think about some of the questions we need to be thinking about as we form the coalition, because we are in the early stages. Can we put the final poll up, Linda, and get people's thoughts on how you'd like to be involved? So if you would select all that apply for you and let us know how you'd like to be engaged going forward, so we know how to reach out to you, that would be very much appreciated. So I'll just give you a couple minutes to look at that and give it some thought.
We have just over half of the people, more responses coming in. And just a few seconds. I think everybody's had a chance here. So we'll take a look at the results.
Wow, that's amazing. 82% of you would like to become a member of the coalition. 55% are willing to contact your elected leaders. 64% say you're willing to attend an event, and 73% receive information and share it with others. So that's terrific. We're really excited to see that kind of willingness to be engaged. I wanted to let you know that we will be adding your names to our MailChimp list, so you can look forward to getting updates from Our Future Milwaukee. And so if you see that coming down the pike, you'll know where it's coming from. We'll also send you a one-page summary of what we talked about regarding the coalition, where we are right now. And we'll try to keep you updated about important things that are coming up, such as the September 15th event and the budget hearings. So I just want to thank, it looks like Louise, you have a final question. Or maybe your hand is just up from last time, I don't know.
Oh, no, I would appreciate a copy of the slide at the end of your presentation, not the one discussion, but the it's kind of like the infinity symbol that shows what's happening with the CC, whatever all those letters were, Climate Change and Economic Equity Coalition, the ECO office, and the other side, that one is really speaks well, I think, to an audience. And if, with your permission, I could use it at an event that we're going to have in the League of Women Voters in September, I would love to do that.
Okay, and I think you have my email address if you.
I
need
do,
to
Jennifer. Thank
get
you.
in touch with me.
I'll email you then. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I want to just end by thanking everyone for coming today. It's really been wonderful to have you here. We can working together, we can make Milwaukee a better place to live while combating climate change. And again, addressing climate is about taking care of people. It's not just our planet that's at risk here. It's us as human beings. And so we're really excited that you're willing to join us in creating a more just, equitable, and sustainable city for everyone. We'll follow up with you, and we will give you our email address in case you have questions or concerns that you want to share with us. But we just want to thank you, and we're ending 1 minute early. How do you like that? Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate you coming today.